I still remember the sound of the dock creaking. It wasn't the gentle sway of water against wood, not the kind of noise that lulled you to sleep during summer nights. No, this was different, heavy, deliberate. Something was walking on it. I froze in my sleeping bag, my skin prickling under the summer heat, while my cousin whispered from the other side of the room, "Did you hear that too?" We shouldn't have stayed in that lake house. It wasn't meant for us. And by the end of that week, we understood exactly why. It was the summer of 2011 when my family decided to rent out a cabin by the lake for a week-long vacation. The house was old, with sun-faded wood and a dock that stretched far out into the water. The kind of place that looked beautiful in the daytime. Bright, shimmering lake, dragonflies skimming the surface. But something about it shifted at night. I was 16 then, traveling with my parents, my cousin Lily, and my younger brother Ethan. The first day was fun. We swam, grilled food, and sat by a bonfire until the fireflies replaced the stars. But that night, when the house grew quiet, I noticed the way the air seemed heavier, the way the crickets stopped chirping all at once. And then came the sound, that slow, measured creaking of wood from the dock outside, as though someone or something was pacing back and forth right over the water. The next morning, I mentioned it casually to the owner, Mr. Carver, who had come by to drop off extra firewood. He was an old man, skin weathered by sun and time, with eyes that looked everywhere except yours when he spoke. When I asked if anyone else lived nearby, he paused, adjusting his cap. "Not on this side of the lake," he said, then quieter. "You folks keep your doors locked at night. Don't go wandering down to the dock after dark." I laughed nervously, thinking he was just being dramatic, but the way Lily's face paled, I knew she didn't think he was joking. The second night, Lily and I stayed up playing cards in the upstairs loft. The boys had passed out early, and the adults were downstairs sipping wine. Around midnight, the air got strangely still again. No insects, no breeze, just silence. And then, creak, creak. It started again. That same weight shifting on the dock, like footsteps too heavy for the night air. Lily's eyes darted to mine. "It's not the water," she whispered. Against my better judgment, I crept to the window. The moonlight illuminated the dock perfectly, silver light rippling over the water. But the dock was empty. Still, the sound continued. Clear, deliberate. Step after step after step. I backed away from the window, heart pounding as Lily grabbed my arm. "Don't look too long," she said, her voice shaking. By the third day, none of us felt comfortable swimming. Ethan swore he saw something move under the water, a pale shape just below the surface. He came up gasping, refusing to go back in. Dad brushed it off as fish, but the way Ethan trembled, I knew it wasn't. That night, I woke up to the sound of water dripping. At first, I thought it was just the sink, but then I noticed the wet footprints on the wooden floorboards of the hallway, prints leading from the back door straight toward the stairs. And they weren't ours. They were too large, too heavy. The fourth night was the worst. Lily and I were lying awake, listening to the silence when the footsteps returned, this time heavier, closer. The boards groaned as if the dock was straining under weight it wasn't built to hold. Then came the whisper. Faint, distorted, as if carried by the water itself. A voice. Low, gurgling. Words we couldn't quite make out. Lily clutched my hand. "It's calling," she said. I wanted to tell her she was imagining it, but the moment I opened my mouth, I heard it too, that wet, drowning voice, calling, calling. Ethan, being only 12 and desperate to prove his bravery, decided he'd sneak out to the dock the next night to catch the ghost. He told me his plan in secret, grinning like it was all a joke. But there was nothing funny about the way his laughter died when I said, "What if it doesn't want to be caught?" Despite my warning, I woke at 2 a.m. to the sound of the screen door slamming. My stomach dropped. Ethan was gone. I rushed out barefoot, the night air thick with fog. The moon was hidden, but I could see him, standing halfway down the dock, staring at the black water below. "Ethan!" I shouted. He didn't answer. He didn't even flinch. His body swayed slightly, as though something beneath the water was pulling at him. I ran, the boards groaning under my weight. "Ethan, come back." That's when I saw it. A pale, bloated hand breaking the surface of the lake, gripping the edge of the dock. Fingers too long, skin sagging and gray. Another hand followed, pulling something larger, heavier, closer. I grabbed Ethan's arm and yanked him back just as the dock shuddered violently. Something enormous crashed against it from below, sending water spraying into the air. We sprinted back inside, slamming the door shut behind us. The next morning, Mr. Carver showed up again, unannounced. When he saw our pale faces and the wet footprints still clinging to the dock, he sighed heavily. "I told you not to go out there at night," he muttered. We begged him to explain. He finally did. Decades ago, a family had drowned in that lake, a father and his 2 sons. Their boat capsized late at night. Locals said their bodies were never recovered, that the lake had claimed them. "Since then," Carver said, "anyone who stays in that house hears them, walking the dock, looking for the living to pull under." We left the very next day. None of us argued. None of us even looked back at the dock. But the sound followed us that night as we drove away, the creaking of wood, faint in the distance like footsteps keeping pace with the car. And sometimes, even now, when I'm lying awake in bed, I swear I can still hear it. That slow, heavy sound of waterlogged footsteps. Creak, creak, creak. The first time Daniel saw the cabin, it felt like stepping into a postcard. Perched on the edge of a rocky cliff in northern Maine, overlooking the restless Atlantic, the rental cabin promised a week of peace, hiking, and summer ocean air. Daniel, his girlfriend Mia, and their 2 close friends, Tyler and Grace, had been planning this getaway since spring. But by the time the week was over, none of them would ever want to hear the word vacation again. The drive to the cabin had been long, the road winding deeper into the forest until the GPS barely functioned. When they arrived, the last stretch was a dirt path lined with crooked pines. The cabin stood tall against the backdrop of the cliff, its wood siding darkened by years of salty wind. A wraparound porch faced the ocean, and down below, the tide smashed angrily against jagged rocks. "It's perfect," Grace whispered, taking a photo on her phone. Inside, the place smelled faintly of old wood and damp stone. It was cozy. Too cozy, Daniel thought, like it hadn't been used much in years. Dust gathered in the corners, and though the furniture was rustic, it felt off. Still, after hours of unpacking, they settled into their rooms. Tyler and Grace took the master suite upstairs. Daniel and Mia chose a smaller room on the first floor, its single window overlooking the cliff. That night, after grilling outside, they stayed up playing cards. The wind howled around the house, rattling the shutters. At midnight, Mia excused herself, yawning. Daniel followed soon after, leaving Tyler and Grace still laughing over a round of poker. Sleep came quickly, but around 3 a.m., Daniel awoke. At first, he thought it was just the storm outside. Then he realized it wasn't storming. The wind had stopped. The night was silent, but something was tapping on the window. Slow, deliberate. A scrape, then a pause. Another scrape, He sat up, his heart thudding. Mia stirred beside him. "What is it?" she murmured. Daniel crossed to the window. The glass was cold against his palm. Beyond, only the ink-black expanse of the cliff and the ocean's silver edge below. Nothing. Yet as he leaned closer, something shifted in the fog. A shape. A tall, thin figure, standing perfectly still on the edge of the cliff. Daniel stumbled back, nearly waking Mia fully. He blinked, and when he looked again, the figure was gone. The next morning, Daniel tried to brush it off as exhaustion. Maybe it had been a tree, a trick of the fog. He didn't want to freak Mia out. But over breakfast, Grace casually mentioned something that made his stomach sink. "Hey, did you guys hear tapping last night?" she asked, stirring her coffee. Daniel froze. "What do you mean?" "Like something on the walls." Tyler thought it was branches, but the wind wasn't even blowing. Tyler nodded. "Yeah, it was weird. Like someone was walking around outside." Daniel forced a laugh. "Maybe it was an animal." But the look Tyler gave him said he didn't believe it either. They went hiking that day, trying to shake off the unease. The woods were thick, damp with summer heat, and full of strange noises. Once or twice, Daniel thought he saw movement between the trees, but when he looked again, it was gone. By evening, they returned to the cabin, exhausted. Mia cooked pasta while Tyler started a fire. The night felt almost normal, until the tapping came again. This time, all four of them heard it. From the porch, from the side of the house, from the upstairs window. Tap, tap, scrape. Tyler grabbed a flashlight and stormed outside, swearing. Daniel followed reluctantly. The beam of light cut through the fog, but the porch was empty. The trees swayed gently. Nothing. And then Daniel realized something horrifying. There were footprints in the dirt. Bare feet, long, narrow, pressed deep into the soil, circling the house. By the third night, no one was laughing anymore. They'd kept the lights on, huddled in the living room, the fire still crackling. Grace wanted to leave, but the nearest hotel was hours away. "Tomorrow," Daniel promised. "We'll head out in the morning." But night doesn't care about plans. At 2:14 a.m., the power cut out. The cabin plunged into darkness. Grace screamed. Mia fumbled for her phone, the dim glow of the flashlight app barely cutting through the shadows. Then came the footsteps. Not outside, inside. Slow, deliberate creaks on the wooden floorboards upstairs. "Tyler?" Daniel whispered, though he already knew Tyler was sitting right beside him. The four of them clung to each other, listening. Step, step, step. Across the master bedroom. Down the hallway. Toward the stairs. Tyler, pale as death, grabbed a fire poker from the hearth. Daniel forced himself to stand beside him. They aimed the light up the stairwell. Nothing. But the sound stopped at the top of the stairs, as if whatever it was waiting. Suddenly the tapping returned, this time from every wall, every window, all at once. A relentless chorus of scratches, knocks, and scrapes. Mia sobbed. Grace whispered prayers. Then the sound stopped. Silence swallowed the cabin whole. At dawn, they packed in a frenzy, barely speaking. The cabin was left behind in disarray. Daniel didn't even care about the deposit. The drive back felt endless. No one looked back, not even once. When they finally reached town, Mia demanded they find out what had happened. Tyler asked a gas station clerk if he knew anything about the cabin. The man's face went pale. "You stayed there?" he asked softly. "On the cliff?" They nodded. He shook his head slowly. "You shouldn't have. That cabin's been empty for years. The last family that owned it, they vanished one summer. All 4 of them, never found. Locals say if you stay there, you're not alone. Something walks those cliffs, and it doesn't like visitors." The group exchanged horrified glances. Daniel thought back to the figure in the fog, standing perfectly still on the edge of the cliff, watching, waiting. They drove home in silence, each of them wondering the same thing. If the cabin had been empty for years, who or what was inside with them that night? When 16-year-old Emily Parker first noticed the man, she thought it was just her imagination. It was the middle of July, the air sticky with heat, and she was sprawled on the couch watching TV when movement in the backyard caught her eye. A figure, standing by the edge of the woods. She blinked and rubbed her eyes. No one was there, just trees swaying in the summer breeze. She laughed nervously and told herself she was being paranoid, but deep down, she knew she hadn't imagined it. Emily's parents were out of town for the week, an anniversary trip they'd been planning for months. She wasn't exactly alone. Her older brother Chris was supposed to be in charge. But Chris spent most of his time locked in his room, headphones on, gaming late into the night. That left Emily to wander the house, scrolling through TikTok, eating frozen pizza, and enjoying the rare freedom of being mostly unsupervised. On the second night, as she washed dishes, she glanced out the kitchen window and froze. A man stood near the old oak tree at the back of the yard. Tall, thin, perfectly still. He wore what looked like a dark jacket, even though the summer night was hot. His face was hard to see, hidden in shadow, but Emily could feel his eyes on her. She gasped and dropped a plate. The sound shattered through the house. By the time she looked again, the man was gone. "Chris, I'm telling you, there's someone out there," Emily whispered harshly that night, shaking her brother's arm. Chris groaned, pulling off one headphone. "Em, it's probably some neighbor or a hiker. Chill." "No, you don't get it. He was just standing there, staring at the house." Chris sighed. "Fine. Tomorrow I'll check. Okay? Just stop freaking out." But the next day, Chris didn't check. He slept in until noon, ate chips, and went back to his room. Emily felt trapped, constantly glancing toward the backyard windows, dreading the moment she'd see him again. And that night she did. Emily couldn't sleep. She tossed in bed, sticky with sweat. Sometime past midnight, she heard something. A faint tapping. At first, she thought it was a branch against the glass. Then she realized the sound was too deliberate. Tap, tap, tap. It was coming from her bedroom window. Emily's heart nearly stopped. Slowly, trembling, she turned her head. There he was, the man, standing inches from her window. His face was pale, stretched into an unnatural smile. His eyes were wide, unblinking. His fingers tapped against the glass, slow and steady. Emily bolted upright and screamed. Chris burst in seconds later, but by the time he reached the window, the man was gone. Emily sobbed. "You saw him, right? Tell me you saw him!" But Chris just stood there, face pale. "There's no one out there," he whispered. The next morning, Emily begged Chris to call the police. He reluctantly agreed. 2 officers came by, walking the property, shining flashlights into the woods. They found nothing. "Probably just a prankster," one officer said. "Lock your doors. Keep the curtains shut. Call us if it happens again." Emily wanted to scream. She knew it wasn't just some prank. That night, she convinced Chris to stay downstairs with her. They turned off the lights, sitting together on the couch in silence, watching the windows. Hours passed. And then just after 2 a.m., they heard it. The back door handle, turning, slowly. Chris jumped up, grabbing a baseball bat. Emily covered her mouth to keep from screaming. The door rattled, once, twice, then silence. When Chris flung it open, no one was there. But in the dirt outside, Emily saw them. Footprints, bare, long, almost inhumanly narrow, leading into the woods. By the 5th night, Emily was a wreck. She hadn't slept more than a few hours in days. That evening, while scrolling her phone in the kitchen, she saw movement again. This time, the man wasn't at the edge of the woods. He was standing closer, just beyond the porch, his pale face visible, his smile wider. She screamed for Chris, but when he rushed in, the man was gone again. "Emily, listen," Chris said, finally serious. I've been hearing stuff too. At night, footsteps outside my window, breathing. I didn't want to tell you because I thought I was going crazy." Emily stared at him. "So it's not just me?" Chris shook his head. He's real." The last night before their parents were due home, the storm hit. Thunder shook the walls. Rain lashed against the house. The power flickered, then went out completely. Emily and Chris lit candles, huddling together in the living room. And then the tapping started again. Not just at one window, at all of them. Tap, tap, tap. The man was circling the house. Chris gripped the bat, whispering, "If he comes in, we run." Then came the sound of glass shattering. From the kitchen, Emily screamed as the man climbed through the broken window, pale hands gripping the sill. His eyes gleamed in the candlelight, his mouth stretched into that same horrific smile. Chris swung the bat, connecting with a sickening crack. The man staggered but didn't fall. He only laughed, a dry, hollow sound that made Emily's blood run cold. "Run!" Chris yelled, shoving her toward the front door. They burst into the storm, sprinting barefoot across the yard, rain soaking their clothes. Emily glanced back once. The man stood in the broken window, watching them. Not chasing, just watching. Their parents returned the next morning to find the police already at the house. The kitchen window shattered. Muddy footprints leading inside, but no trace of the man. The officers searched the woods for days, but nothing was found. No fingerprints, no evidence. Emily and Chris never stayed in that house again. Months later, their parents sold it. The new family moved in during the fall. And on the very first night, as their youngest daughter unpacked her bedroom, she heard it, a faint tapping at the window. The campfire was nearly burned down to glowing embers when the first scream pierced through the night. It wasn't the playful kind of scream you'd expect from teenagers playing pranks on each other in the woods. No, this one carried sheer terror, sharp and raw, echoing through the trees like it was bouncing off invisible walls. By the time we grabbed our flashlights and turned toward the sound, the night was utterly silent again. Not even the crickets dared to sing. That was the night our summer camping trip turned into a nightmare none of us would ever forget. There were 6 of us. Me, Jake, my best friend Alex, his girlfriend Sarah, Sarah's cousin Rachel, and 2 brothers we'd grown up with, Evan and Ryan. We were all between 18 and 21, fresh out of high school or just starting college. The plan was simple: spend a week camping in Black Hollow Woods, a vast forest reserve a few hours from town. It was summer, the air was warm, and we wanted to disconnect. No cell phones, no internet, no adults. Just us, the woods, and freedom. But Black Hollow had a reputation. Old stories whispered of people going missing there, campers vanishing without a trace, their campsites left perfectly intact. Locals warned us not to go too deep, not to stay past sundown. We laughed it off, of course. Every forest has ghost stories. Still, the name stuck in my head. Black Hollow. The first night was fine, mostly. We set up tents by a clearing near a narrow river. We fished, roasted marshmallows, told scary stories by the fire. Alex, always the clown, pretended to hear voices in the trees, and Sarah kept smacking him for trying to freak us out. But at one point, Rachel went quiet. Her eyes kept darting toward the tree line. "What is it?" I asked. She shook her head. "I thought I saw someone out there." Evan shined his flashlight, but the beam only cut through mist and thick trunks. No one. We laughed it off, but a strange heaviness lingered in the air as we crawled into our tents. I couldn't shake the feeling that we weren't alone. The next morning, everything seemed fine. The sun shone bright, the river sparkled, and the forest looked beautiful instead of creepy. We hiked, swam, and spent the day exploring. By evening, we were exhausted but happy. That night, though, things changed. We were eating around the fire when Ryan frowned. "Where's Rachel?" We thought she was in her tent, but when we called out, she didn't answer. We split up with flashlights, calling her name. Finally, Evan found her standing at the edge of the trees, staring blankly into the forest. "Rachel, what are you doing?" he asked, putting a hand on her shoulder. She jumped like she hadn't realized he was there. I thought I heard someone calling my name." Her voice trembled. "There's nobody out here," Evan said firmly, but his eyes darted nervously into the woods. We pulled her back to camp, trying to laugh it off, but nobody really laughed. On the third night, the scream happened. We just finished telling stories when it came, shrill and human from deep in the trees. We froze. "Was that Rachel?" Sarah whispered. But Rachel was right there, clutching her knees, shaking. Evan jumped up. "Someone's out there. They might be hurt." Against our protests, he grabbed a flashlight and stormed into the woods. We waited. 5 minutes. 10 minutes. "Evan!" Ryan called, panic creeping into his voice. "Answer me, man!" Silence. We argued whether to go after him, but fear kept us frozen. Finally, Alex stood up. "We can't just leave him." So Alex and I went in, leaving the others by the fire. The deeper we went, the quieter it became. Even our footsteps seemed muffled. Then our lights landed on something. Evan's flashlight. Lying on the ground, still on. But no Evan. We stumbled back, terrified, and told the others. Ryan broke down, insisting we keep searching, but Sarah begged us to wait until daylight. We argued until dawn. By morning, Evan was still gone. We debated whether to leave, but Ryan refused. "I'm not abandoning my brother. He wouldn't leave me." So we stayed one more night. A mistake. That evening, Ryan went missing. One second he was sulking by the river, the next gone. His footprints led into the trees and just stopped. No broken branches, no drag marks, no sign of a struggle, just nothing. It didn't make sense. That night we didn't sleep. The fire crackled and the woods whispered. I swear I heard my own name carried on the wind. "Jake." Sarah heard it too. She clamped her hands over her ears. rocking back and forth. Rachel whispered, "They're not lost. They've been taken." "By who?" Alex demanded. Rachel's eyes were glassy. "The Hollow." None of us knew what she meant, but she wouldn't explain. Then sometime past midnight, Rachel vanished too. One moment she was sitting by the fire. The next, she was gone. No sound, no scream, just gone. It was down to me, Alex, and Sarah. We packed at dawn, ready to leave, but the paths seemed wrong. Every trail we followed circled back to our campsite. The forest was twisting itself around us. By nightfall, we were still trapped. That's when Alex snapped. "Screw this! If they want me, come and get me!" he shouted into the trees. The forest answered. A low hum vibrated through the ground, like the earth itself was growling. The trees creaked, their shadows stretching unnaturally long, and then Alex was gone. One blink and the spot where he stood was empty. Sarah screamed. I grabbed her hand, and we ran into the darkness, not caring where. Branches tore at our clothes. Roots clawed at our ankles, but we didn't stop. The humming grew louder, surrounding us, pressing into our skulls. Then Sarah tripped. I pulled her up, but when I looked into her eyes, they weren't her eyes anymore. They were black, empty. She smiled at me, a slow, unnatural grin, and whispered, "Join us." I ran. I don't remember how I made it out. One second, I was stumbling through endless trees, and the next, I was collapsing onto a roadside as the sun rose. A passing truck driver found me, dehydrated, half delirious. When the police searched, they found our campsite. Tents intact, backpacks full, the fire pit cold, but no trace of the others. Not even footprints. Months later, I returned with rangers. They told me about the legend, how Black Hollow isn't just a forest, but a place that hungers. It lures people in with whispers, traps them, and swallows them whole. They said those who vanish there aren't dead. Not exactly. They're part of it now. I never saw my friends again, but sometimes, when I close my eyes, I hear them calling my name.